Welcome back to the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast featuring members of the Win with Dice team. I'm Calvin, and I'm joined here by Ramon.
Hey guys, hope you're having a good day. This is the Win with Dice podcast, a podcast all about tabletop RPGs, running them, playing them. Calvin and I have been players in many different RPGs and have run many different games. And what we try to do here on the podcast is, demystify and take you guys behind the DM screen, show you guys how the sausage is made, essentially. So it feels a little bit easier for you to jump in and start DMing your own games, or if you're just a player, just hearing us about all of our adventures in our stories, to give you a little bit of that narrative boost you need to invent some new character, or some NPCs, or just rip whatever we say off. That's totally fair too. But yeah, that's the show.
Yeah, you can totally do that. I mean, I don't know. I don't have anything else to add. That is definitely what the show is. Ramon, how have you been? I guess you haven't really done much RPG stuff recently.
Yeah, pretty much. I haven't run anything in a long time. I've been working on a secret project for a while, so I've been pretty busy with that. I do want to get back to running games. I've been talking to some players, and they're like, "Hey man, it would be kind of nice."
How the itch going? Yeah, no, I got a session coming up that I gotta prep for, because it's gonna be a rather large one that I don't know if we're gonna do in person, actually. So I gotta make sure I figure that out. Nice. I've also been trying to look into some different rule sets for things, because I want to get back to doing. I watched Super Crooks. I think I mentioned this last week. I watched Super Crooks on Netflix. So it's kind of got me wanting to get back to that whole supervillain heist idea. As well as recently starting the recent season of JoJo. It was all set in a prison, so it's like, oh, this could be fun. A supervillain prison story would also be fun. I don't know. I got RPGs on the brain all the time, apparently.
Yeah, for sure. I feel it. I have the itch to run a heist. I've been playing a lot of Persona 5 lately, and then so with the Phantom Thieves and going and doing that kind of stuff, I think would be pretty cool. It would be kind of cool to do that in like a fun, like a Pathfinder setting, where it's like you invade someone's dream, and if you die in the dream, you die in real life kind of situation, where like you're trying to steal someone's information from someone mentally. That would be kind of cool. That'd be cool, like a little Inception game. Well, so yeah, that'd be kind of cool.
Well,
but
we
yeah,
should rip that off in the future.
Yeah, totally. If someone else can do it, tell me about it. I would love to hear it. You do it before me.
Of course, yeah. In the comments, you can drop any sort of ideas you might have for any kind of unique and cool sessions you might want to run, as well as any other questions and topics you want us to cover on the podcast. We did get some topics from Twitter from a couple of people who I just randomly tweeted out that I didn't know what to talk about today, and then some people replied with some stuff, including a significant number of topics. So I don't even know if we'll be able to get to all of them this week. I highly doubt it. So we'll get into those. But first, we have to get into the most important part of the show, the Win with Dice weekly GM tip of the week.
Yes, the Win with Dice weekly GM tip of the week, brought to you by Ramon this week. Mostly by me. I think the majority of them are by me. But yes, I'm here once again, flying by the seat of my pants.
Of course.
That's
how podcasting is.
Of course. But yeah, so this tip for this week is, thinking about when you want to start your campaign, like what level you want your players to be started at, right? There is a thing about, starting your campaign at level 1, but there's also kind of like, if you're playing with experienced players and, maybe the type of vibe you're trying to go for is like a collection of like already seasoned veterans, starting at higher levels is perfectly fine. I would actually think that if you're a new GM, you could start your players off at like level 3, level 4, or whatever the higher levels is. Actually, they would have more HP, so you're less likely to kill them. Funny enough.
Yeah.
So if that's something you're worried about, yeah, man, and you could start off. And like it'll be fun for the players. I know it might be, if everyone's new, it might be a little bit difficult to get leveling up done, and not if everyone's not used to the system. But yeah, honestly, if you're running your first game, you could try starting at like a higher level. It'll give people more cool things to play with, and maybe get them hooked a little bit faster. It might even get yourself hooked a little bit faster. I gotta be honest with you, goblins are funny and fun, but I get tired of them. I want to like beat people up with cool things too, right? So it'll just open up the whole library of bad guys to you, and you could put them into some hairy situations a lot more sooner. Take off the training wheels if you just start your campaign or adventure at a higher level. And as well, you could still play them as novice. I mean, like, you don't know how they got those skills. Maybe they're just that good. I don't know. But that's my quick weekly GM tip of the week. I don't know, Calvin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely start at those lower levels. You can still have them as these newbie adventurers, but you'll have more wiggle room with what you can throw at them versus a level 1 character that has like a much smaller floor of enemies. Like at level 3, you can go down further, you can go up higher, as opposed to level 1 where you can't go down as far because you're like kind of at the bottom there. I think also when it comes to new players, it'll give you a chance to sort of explain how leveling up works in whatever system you're playing. This is assuming you're playing a system that has like levels and classes or whatever, but you can use it as an opportunity to explain the functions of how that works without having to go through like a bunch of levels all at once, just like 1 or 2. Additionally, I think it also helps out for experienced players, because I was just thinking the most recent campaign of Critical Role, they're all starting off at level 3. And it kind of gets you over that hump of level 1, that soft and squishy space where you got to be like extra careful and things. Like, you can get into a bit more fun, and you have a bit more abilities to play with. So you can do more unique and interesting things. You can express your character a bit more. There's less limitations in comparison. And yeah, I think that works for people who know their way around the game a bit more, so they know how to like get the most out of those things. You're not like waiting to be better.
For sure. And like maybe you're not even using like a scaling system like Pathfinder. I don't know what system it is, but actually the higher level you go, the less likely the dice swing's going to kill you actually, because you just have more HP, you have more defensive options, you have more attacking options. It's just like as the game kind of develops, it's like you're less likely to get hit and you're less likely to miss, which is always really good for players, and it makes them feel good too, right? So yeah.
Less chance of like random happenstance ruining your character right off the bat before you can like really get somewhere with them, especially if you're the kind of person who gets invested in your character even at a low level.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I know some of the people we talked about last week would probably be against that idea of getting invested in your character at that level, but it happens, and it would suck if you just lose all that because of a random die roll at level 1. It's better if you lose it at a random die roll at level 3, of course.
Yeah. At least, I mean, you didn't just get stabbed by a goblin and you're just dead and you're like, lol. I guess that's the end of Sir Lancelot or whatever. Like the most prestigious upcoming knight just gets, died in a hole somewhere. So sad. But that's life. Lol. Yeah. Okay, let's
you deserve it a bit more if you have more power to work with.
Yeah. You see, he died fighting something cool. Shit. Let's go to something a little bit lighter. Let's just jump into the show.
Actually, this is a great segue. We could talk about character death.
Yeah, totally light.
Our pal
Super
Shaka, who we always shout out at the end of these episodes. He brought up that as subject as a topic, and I don't know that we've really talked about it directly as much. I know it's come up during some of my recaps when I have killed a character, but I don't know that we've talked too much about character death as a subject on its own.
Okay.
I have some thoughts. I was wondering if
I would hope you have some thoughts. You've murdered a lot of characters, Calvin.
Well, 3. I mean, it's 3, right? It's only 3. Yeah.
It's only 3 so far. Actually, I don't think I've ever actually killed a character. No, I've killed one character. Sorry, my bad, Calvin. I've definitely killed one character for sure. The rest I've almost always killed, but that's half the fun of being a GM is to play with death, put death real close to the party, but then never actually put that death, that happens, but like in that circumstance, it was just, a 1 to a 20 and then it was done, or 20 to a 1 and then it was done.
I was under the impression that your kill count was much higher because you like most GMs, I think you have that one die called the PC killer.
I do, but I've talked to my PC killer. We're on the same page. We're like, we're gonna hurt them a lot, all right, but we're gonna try not to kill them. To be honest with you, I don't want to kill anybody's character, but I also don't want to go easy on anyone. And most times, everyone usually leaves one of my fights with like, beyond bloodied, right? Like if they're looking at quarter of an HP, like usually everyone gets hurt real bad, and like across the board, everyone gets hurt real bad. None of my fights are ever a walkthrough, but I never try and kill any PC because, it would be really easy for me to do, because I could just, all the bad guys attack one dude and then they're dead.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I love doing that, and I love receiving the, like, intimidation from a GM, like the, I'm totally gonna kill your character and that kind of thing. And I know some people find that, like, I don't know. Like, I know some people kind of don't like that getting that impression from a GM that it's like an adversarial position, and I totally understand that. But for me, like, I'm always playing with people who I feel comfortable with, so I feel like they know when I say stuff like that. And it's like, I don't know. Good luck, guys. See if you make it. We'll see. Like, whenever I do things like that, it's like, I'm not. If I wanted to actively kill every character that I play with, I could go into the Bestiary or the Alien Archive or the Mutants and Masterminds Rogues Gallery and find what's the highest level thing here. Here, fight 2 of them at once.
Just double it, and you're like, lol. And it's like, even if those 2 die, just be like, well, they had 1 in reserve. Like, here, I have infinite spawns, dog. I'm the GM. Like,
right.
Right. And I think that character death needs to be on the table if you're playing a game with violence. I should say, like, I don't think that every game and every table should have death, and like I think that if you don't want to cross that boundary, like, obviously don't, right? But for me, it's like, even though I have not really killed too many characters, I do like press my players a lot. All of my encounters are deadly. All of my encounters are arguably very, very dangerous for anyone to be in. Honestly, I think it's just the nature of my game. I arm my players with nukes and then give them absurd odds to use them on, right? So it's like every time I invent a new item for my players, I give them a new special ability that might be a little bit too strong, I feel pretty confident into pushing their limits, and I do. So, and that just comes with practice, and I'm just very lucky, I guess. Maybe my dice aren't as lucky as I think they are, and I just roll a lot of 1s, so that's why my players are still alive, just barely. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I need that luck.
Calvin too strong, roll too many crits.
It's funny because, like, it's never the kind of thing that I expect to be difficult. Like, I've made fights that I expect to be difficult. And they sometimes turn out to be, but it's the ones that I don't normally expect to be difficult, like, because for your character, in our, what would I call that campaign? The Quest of the Fate Seer?
Yeah.
When I had you drop in on that, you're just playing, like, this random cleric guy who got mobbed by wolves, like, that wasn't meant to be a super deadly encounter, and the other times it was, like, a random set of wyverns. And that was more of a narrative beat that was like, these particular, not wyverns, just drakes. This particular kind of drake isn't meant to be here. This is super weird. Oh no, someone died. That kind of threw off that whole thing. And then there was that one wyvern that was fairly high level relative to the party, but it was like still within proper range, and just, things happen.
Right. But in those instances, there are all very different versions of character. The character death isn't like a one kind of scenario, right? Like with my cleric person, I was just kind of a random dude. I was just jumping into a couple sessions to help you guys out, and he wasn't a character I was too attached to, and he died, and I was like, okay, cool. Right? Like, I wasn't too beat up about it, right? but in the instance where it's like you're just this random encounter with these drakes out in the water or whatever, wyverns or whatever out in the water, they in your game, like that was like kind of like, oh no, that wasn't supposed to be like any sort of scripted fight. That wasn't even like a boss fight. This is just like out of the blue in the wild, like someone's just not coming with us anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like that has such like a different impact from just like a random dropping character, right? That's just like, this person obviously had like a story going for them, and there were great things in their future, and then they're just gone. But I think you can still spin it as like being like, well, now how serious the situation is, right? Even your party isn't immune to whatever's happening to the world at large, right?
Oh, definitely.
It kind of, it presses the situation while also humbling the players, right? It's like,
I don't know if they needed it, but they certainly did come back stronger after that.
With, more resolve to try to figure out this shit. Get those Dracos and put in that Coronum kind of deal, right? Like,
yeah, because that was a situation where they came back and they had to fight the same wyvern again, and it was a long, grueling fight, but they managed to come through it victorious.
Yeah, right. I mean, even that one's different too, because that one is like up against a significant foe, right? If you're fighting a boss, I think if a character dies in a boss fight, that's all on the table, man. Like you're at a pretty hardcore checkpoint in the story, right? This is a very insurmountable odd that you've been kind of leading yourself up to, kind of deal, right? It's like, you're testing your mettle, so I think it's totally worth it. Like, it's like if anytime to kill I think character death at any point, there's only like really one or two ways. Like I think they're both satisfying for the player and the GM. It's during a boss fight, or saving another player character that they care about, right? Or like NPC or somebody, right? It's like giving your life for somebody else, and giving your life during a very tough enemy are the two things I think that players would agree, like, yes, this is probably okay, right? I know I'm sad, but at least I get a cool story out of it, right? Like that's the thing. It's like they want to be able to talk about the character in some sort of limelight, even though they fell.
Yeah, that was certainly the case with your cleric, whose name still escapes me. But he did die like helping people, particularly because the point of that campaign was just like a escort quest, basically. So you were there like to help save the person that this party has been escorting.
Yeah. And like I think that like you shouldn't just move on from character death, even though obviously the person's gonna make a new character and stuff like that. But I mean, in real life we have funerals, and I think like in game these characters are supposed to be emulating, real human beings or whatever, right? With like thoughts and feelings. Then have a funeral, right? Maybe even go around and have every character talk a little bit about them and just reflect a little bit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just put them on a boat and shoot that fire arrow and sing that sad song while your friend, goes off, right, to the afterlife or whatever. Also, I mean, it's also magical stuff, so like who knows, maybe they'll come back later as a ghost, or like in their time of need it's like they're resurrected as some sort of revenant zombie that shows up and it's like, maybe, aha, I will be your friend once more before I die, right? It's like they still have something to do. There's so many other cool ways for you to incorporate a dead character back into the story, so that player still feels like that character's still on the journey with them, right? That's the kind of thing. Character death just means that like that person doesn't get to add more into the narrative that we're writing. But I think that like if you bring them back up, like say like, oh man, maybe my new character has some attachment to them, or like maybe the party's like, maybe changes their names to be like this person, are avenging this person or something like that, or just like, everybody, takes that bad moment and uses it for like good later. I think it's really good. For sure. To be fair, Calvin, I have lots of characters. Like I myself, my characters have died lots of times. I have lots of dead characters. So
see, that would stress me out. Like killing characters is stressful, but like losing a character for me, because I get so invested in all my characters, I'm still not over Drake dying, and that was years ago.
To be fair, Drake dying we probably have mentioned this before in one of our podcasts, but Calvin's character Drake, which was actually gearing up to be a pretty integral party member, immediately I think was so there was a bad situation where one of the players was going to be swept away like in a sewer. Drake was holding onto them to try and save them, but he got snuck up on by a rogue, and that rogue rolled a 20, a natural 20 to kill him. So then he immediately, we're playing Pathfinder 2, he immediately went to dying 3 or something like that, or dying 2.
Yeah, 2 or I don't remember if I was wounded before. I think it was definitely a crit that took me down. And in Pathfinder 2, there's different stages of dying, and different death saves will obviously like bring you further and further down that track.
Yeah. So he rolled a 20 to get you like basically down you. So you had 2 wounds. So you're a dying 2, and then for your death saving roll, you rolled a 1, which is basically add 2 to the dying count, right?
Yeah.
And you die at dying 4. So it was like immediately. I think you took your turn right after too. It was like 21 dead. Like there was no chance at all.
Yeah. Now mechanically, we did technically have to. I think after someone takes you down, you have to move your turn to just before them, which is something I wasn't aware of at the time or for some time afterwards. That was not a rule that I remembered.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was basically, that was what happened. Like just 2 unlucky rolls and character gone.
Yeah, which was super tragic. And actually, I think a lot of, since then, in the Pirate campaign, we've brought up Drake a lot, actually.
We really have.
Yeah, well, everyone cared about Drake. Like everybody else made it out of that sewer alive, except Drake didn't. And then there's rumors of like some sort of like strange necromancy going on, and they left Drake's body there, so they're like, oh no, our friend, right? So that's also one of the cool things about having dead characters, that you can have more meaningful situations where it's like now it could be incorporating the dead character or like their background or something like that, right? Yeah,
there are definitely things with like
if you go back there, I don't know. It's gonna be some, it'll be pretty fun, I gotta say, but be careful when you go back there.
There are definitely things with like dead characters that are like, because like they'll have their own backstories and places they came from and certain elements that certainly there was some stuff that I was interested to get to if it ever came up, and then like a character dies and it's like I don't know what to do with this now. I guess it's just here.
yeah, and then you just, I don't know, but you keep it there, and then you just let it kind of chill until you make it relevant. You bring it in, and that player would be like, oh, I remember, right? Like, thanks for. They'll feel good because that character that they well, and all their hopes or dreams are still being dealt with. Maybe whatever their situation or like their goal was is now being taken up by like a family member or like some other party, and it's like they might not be in control of the situation, but at least they might get some resolution in that kind of plot line, right? So
right. Yeah. I'm not sure what else we can say about character death.
Yeah, just to like I don't know, like if a character's gonna die, maybe it's to save somebody that they care about, or it's up against a really bad guy. Those are probably the best case scenarios. If you're gonna ramp up difficulty, just do that. Often they probably happen at the same time.
Or it could just happen at random.
Yeah, and if ended up a character is dead, talk to that player and see if they want to try and get resurrected. Don't just assume that they want to or they want to move on to a different character. Just talk to that player after the session, be like, what do you think? What do you want to do, right? And most times, players have like a backup character that they've been thinking about, and they're like, okay, let me flesh out this character, and usually they'll either try and come in totally separate or try and like, this is my brother, right? Right, kind of deal. And then I think it's really important to hold a funeral, like for dead characters, like actually, even if it's just like an NPC character, like giving everybody the moment to grieve a little bit, like in story, in narrative, even on the table, right? Because I think it's good, and I think it'll be fun, and I think it'll be a great moment for all the players to get, involved.
Oh yeah. It's a great, like, it's a unique RP thing that doesn't come up very often, so just take full advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. So Shaka, I hope that helps. I don't know. I haven't been catching up on your story or whatever you've been running, but hope none of your players died, or else, or I'm sorry for your loss.
It was just a suggestion of a topic, so I don't know if he was asking for anything specifically, but if you're out there listening, anybody out there listening, if you have a specific thing, again, just drop it down below, and we'll put it on our list of possible topics to talk about. So yeah, one person who gave me a bunch of replies is at Siege Vault, and I'll put a link to them below, just because it was really nice of them to like reply with like 5 or 6 tweets of potential topics that we could really flesh out. So one, because we discussed these briefly before the show, one that seemed to spark some ideas was sort of discussing character creation and how to come up with a character when you're sort of like lacking ideas, or how to translate your stats or specific features of your character to be fleshed out as like what they mean for your character. Like if your character has certain abilities, like you mentioned, like power attacking, or if you have certain abilities like rogue stealth abilities or magical abilities from different sources, how can these sort of influence the kind of character that you make, especially when you're like lacking ideas? And I guess this sort of comes from the idea of you come up with like maybe your class, or you get your stats, you roll your stats, or you buy your stats, whatever the system is. You have those before you make the character, and then like what kind of comes from that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I also have a problem too. I face that problem often where I'm like, oh, this is a cool mechanic, but it's like now I have to slap a
personality on it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like, what kind of personality is this? And like, honestly, most times I'm pretty much a blank slate player. I will show up to the table and I'll have like maybe a little bit of like an inkling of like what of what kind of character I want to play, but it's like mostly just like archetypical, right? It's nothing too nuanced. But then like slowly, as like I meet the other players and we get into it and things kind of happen, it kind of shapes my the character's personality, for sure. I totally get this where it's like you're like, damn it, all these numbers are cool, but like how do I make them like sing, right? Yeah. Like how do I breathe life into these numbers?
Yeah, for sure. Like I definitely have had moments where there's this one character I keep talking about. I keep wanting to make a fairy barbarian, but I don't know what they would be like as a person. And I guess I'm just sort of figuring like, okay, well, if they're like super small but super strong, like there's some obvious tropes and archetypes that would lead into. But at the same time, like there's things that would develop more as you play. Like as you're playing, you would see, well, they seem to be doing a lot of damage with this weapon. They seem to be, and this is just things that are like happen by chance, like with Bren in our Fandelver game. This ranger he started off as a ranger with a bow, but just got really lucky with a whole lot of unarmed melee attacks. So now that's kind of like Bren's thing, is doing these punches. And I think a lot of character will come out as you play, even if you don't have so much of it at the moment of character creation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that like even just a lot of times you try to get like a session 0 in or something like that, right, to talk to the players. I mean, it's also a good idea to not only talk about just like the numbers and what kind of character, like classes or any of that kind of crunch. It's also a good idea to talk about what kind of characters they're playing, right? Like what's the archetype, what's their mood, what's maybe if it's not a secret goal that only you and the GM knows, maybe it could be shared with the players, right? Mm-hmm. Just before then, so it kind of helps the party coalesce into a unit versus like all these edgelords in a corner, right? Like that's always the funny part. It's all the edgelords. There's 5 edgelords in 4 corners. Who's out? Like,
yeah, who wants to be the one to initiate conversation?
Yeah, right. But yeah, for sure. I think that like if you're talking a game with like feats and talents, those obviously have to come from somewhere, right? It's like those are obviously like learned experiences. Like you don't just get like born and programmed with like, I don't know, cleave or something, or like a spell. So you know, you can use those like the game mechanics portion of it to be like, well, you know, someone taught me this technique, right? I would say even just go as far as players, like if something's even just called power attack, just change the name and it'll just be like power attack. But you could be like, this is like, I don't know, my Dragon Fist power pile drive or whatever, and it's like, this is the technique that I invented because I'm making my own martial arts kind of deal. And you know, that's like a pretty, honestly, that's like a pretty solid place for a character to start. It's like you can be that's like a lot of characterization right there. That shows that, you know, the character is creative and also is into fighting. You know, they're obviously has a clear goal of like, you know, being a better fighter and proving to everyone how good his martial arts is. And, you know, he obviously values his own opinions because, or that person's, you know, their opinions, because, you know, they're trying to sell people to be like, look how cool, you should learn how to fight like me.
Yeah.
Kind of deal, right?
And mechanically, it's just a common thing.
Yeah, it's just like a random ass common thing, right? Like even like a spell like Fireball, right? It's like, you're like, why is your character choosing Fireball? Do they have like or like your choice of spells, right? Are they practical? If you're just trying to cover your bases, maybe your character could just be practical because they have a wide assortment of spells to deal with stuff. Is your character have like a bunch of non-lethal actions? That's pretty different. If you just chose a bunch of non-lethal actions, that could speak reason to why your character doesn't want to fight everybody all the time, or tries to find like alternative methods for stuff, right? You know, that's like, you know, you could definitely so like you could definitely come from the character sheet into the character versus like going from the character to the character sheet kind of deal, right? So yeah, for sure. Like I do it all the time. Although most of my characters either are like the leader, or it's like either like the leader type of character, or the person who is gonna just goes forward and doesn't think, just runs into danger, or it's the I'm smarter than you character. Like,
I quite like that second one, because we need someone to push the big red button to move the plot forward. Yeah,
I definitely am that person, for sure. Also, well, I mean, that's not true. I play a lot of characters, but usually my characters, like Silrona, is definitely that jump. He's a combination of I'm smarter than you, but also like I'll just jump into danger and run away. He'll leap in, plow first, and ask questions later.
Like a real cowboy wizard.
Yeah, right. But versus like what other games we play in Calvin? I feel like we haven't played in a game together in a while. Oh yeah, versus like in Shaka's game, when he ran his couple sessions for us.
Oh yeah, you really you definitely jumped in a lot there.
Yeah, I did, but I was probably the team leader in that one. I definitely took the reins of most conversations and was like trying to organize the team into doing something, right? And you know, those are like, you know, those are just where I'm comfortable with, so that's where I am. I would argue that you are more comfortable being the mom of a group. Like if there's someone to be like,
weird how many times, even in Shaka's game, I had a smidge of mom energy, not as much as like Macy has, because she ended up being like a sort of party field leader, or Helen, who was the captain of a ship, and even Teeks, my recent changeling druid, who has now become the mom of the party. I don't know how that keeps happening.
It's just really funny, man. It's so funny. You and all your boys always have to carry all these boys all the time.
Look, you just give me a bunch of boys to take care of, I'm gonna fall into mom mode, I guess.
But yeah, right. And but I think it's mostly because you also just like you find yourself in a lot of leadership positions sometimes, and like, you know, you also care about the characters. You're invested into other people's characters as much as they are, So, naturally, you probably just tend to being like, well, I want to make sure that you stay alive as long as possible, so I can always enjoy the banter between us, because you don't want the banter to ever end. No. Like the flim flam must flow, right? Like,
there is one piece of RPG advice that I always remember, and I don't remember where I heard it from. So hopefully I'll figure it out and link it below. If I don't link it below, it means I didn't figure it out. But there was one thing I heard that was like, be a fan of other people's characters. And that's something that just rooted very deeply in me, because I really am a fan of other people's characters. Like, I always want to see what they do. I want to celebrate their successes. I want to be there for their failures. I really enjoy that, because it's something that I don't know anything about. Like, in the game world, I'll know some things because my character's involved in some things, involved in some stories, but usually other people's, like, whole situations, I don't know what's going on with them. I didn't see their backstory, so I love to see how those things get fleshed out and play out. Like, one of the player, well, I mean, I like all the players in Critical Role, but one of the players I like a lot is Travis Willingham, who is, like, I mean, everyone in Critical Role is like those voice actors that have like 100 billion different roles and things, so you will recognize his name or recognize something he's been in if you look him up. But he's just such a great, like, fan of other people. Mm-hmm. Like, in Campaign 2, one person was playing a barbarian, and he was just so, like, he was celebrating them at every moment because he had played a barbarian in Campaign 1, and I don't know, he's just, you can see he gets really into other people's stuff whenever something's going on with them. And that's just something I really respect in a player, and it's something that I like to emulate, because I also feel like I just like seeing other people's situations going on.
Yeah, for sure, right? Like, and that's a good way to help your character too. If you're invested in somebody else's character, like, that's like a bond you can share with that character, and that could influence like how your how your character plays and how what they want to do. But also, borrowing from like storytelling a little bit, like, you are playing like a party group and you guys are going on an adventure to go do stuff. So, the 5-man band is a thing, right, that you can heavily draw on. Like, when you're hanging out and you're doing that session 0 or whatever, the first session, kind of get a feel of like what everyone's trying to do, and then figure out what's missing, right, from the 5-man band. You got the leader, right, which, it's cool. You got the heart of the team. You have the Lancer, which is like the second in command, who's like, trying to vie for the leader spot. You have like the smart guy, and you have the big guy, right?
Yeah.
Like, right, you can be any one of them if you want, right? If there's a gap missing. I would argue that in Ineon, that happened like spectacularly. I don't think we have a smart person though.
like most RPG parties, there is no smart person.
It's true. I would argue that in Rebecca's game, the high school game, Grimes is the smart one, which is hilarious.
Yeah, I was about to say, I hope you're not going to say it's Artie.
It's definitely not Artie. Grimes is actually kind of smart, but like, it's also because like I've played a lot of games and I'm playing Grimes, so like it's hard for me not to see some stuff coming from like a mile away. But so if your characters are lacking someone big and tough, and you just happen to be big and tough, you're the big guy. If you're you want to be the, you don't want to be the leader of the party, but you want to support the leader, you're the Lancer. You know what I mean? You want to take care of people and be mom, then you could be the heart. You know what I mean? Like, there's tons of ways you can borrow from those storytelling tropes to like be a part of the thing. Another cool storytelling trope is like the mentor. Maybe you're playing an older character and you're like, well, I'm a melee fighter, the paladin's a melee fighter, but like I'm like a fighter, but I'm older, so maybe I can play it off as being like, the youths, right? Like, I'm here to help you, or the grizzled veteran, or like you could play the newbie, like fresh like out of school or fighter school or something, just got your first sword or some shit like that, and be like, being really naive. So, there's ways where it's like, how smart is my character, how much knowledge, how much world experience they have. And, that could be going back to the Siege Fault's original question or topic is like, you can do that by the character sheet. What's your stats, right? If you don't have a lot of wisdom is the stat for the being kind of wise, then you don't have a lot of experience. If you're, really have a lot of intelligence, you're book smart, right? If you have a lot of charisma, well, you're charismatic, that kind of deal. But that could also be like what kind of feats you took, right? Do you have a lot of skills that combo into each other? Sure. Do you have a lot that might be something that you're highly focused on doing a thing, you're specialized, versus like, maybe you're a grizzled veteran who has a wide assortment of skills, right? That for any occasion, right? Whatever situation you're in, that shows like, that you might not your tools might be not effective, but at least you have an answer to every situation, right? Like you could be the all-rounder. It's just kind of that kind of thing, right? It's like you can totally, again, you can dip into your character sheet from your choices mechanically and put that into the narrative of your character. Yeah. I think,
and to tie it back to what we were talking about before, it also helps if you're starting at a higher level. You can consider that when it comes to forming the personality of your character. Like if they have some training under their belt, how do they get it and things like that, and where does that put them in the party? What role do they fulfill at that point? There's a few things we could talk about. I think we might have time for at least one more. We could talk a bit about homebrewing stuff, because one of the things that was brought up is whether people should be constantly playing one particular system when they have ideas that don't fit in that system. Like trying to turn Dungeons and Dragons into a mech game or something like that. I think we might have vaguely touched on this a bit before, but we can definitely delve more into it. Because for me personally, like, I'm a big fan of adapting other things into the system you want to play. Sometimes even over playing other systems. Because I know like other systems they might be more or less complex to learn depending on how long those rule books are. But, like with most players, like sometimes you settle into a game and you're enjoying the game, but then you want to do this one hyper specific thing that isn't necessarily specifically covered by any rules in the rule book. For me, I've been wanting to do like a heist thing in Mutants and Masterminds. I've been talking about it for ages. So I've been looking at how they work in Blades in the Dark. Especially things like, because Blades in the Dark, they have a flashback mechanic, which is like a thing your character had done before, but that you're describing in the moment. So it's like you may, you say you come to a point where you have to get past a guard. You can use the flashback mechanic, and I think there's like a role involved in the actual game. I was going to do it differently in a different system, obviously. But it's like, at some point in the past, your character paid off that guard, or you have some history with that guard, so you're able to use that to sort of make it easier to get past them because you flash back to a moment you already did that. Sort of like a typical heist story, right? Like heist stories normally have like a whole lot of flashbacks of like, here's how we set this thing up and now it's playing out, look how smart we are. Like how would you set that up normally in an RPG game, right?
For sure. Like, for sure, Calvin. I think that it's hard because I'm always like breaking games all the time.
Yeah, you especially.
Yeah, I do. I'm always making my own thing out of it all the time. I'm always just introducing my own flim-flam into the already complex enough rules, just so I'm like, hey, check this cool thing I did. There you go, player. Don't beat my face in too hard. Like,
yeah, especially when it comes to items.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that I think Siege is trying to get at specifically is like, when is it the time to be like, maybe we should be playing a different game kind of deal, right? Or like, when is it, like, I think you've definitely positioned it to say that, we're comfortable with the rules. It's just in this one specific scenario, I'm going to add in all this extra shit for this like one chapter of the game, right? Yeah. Right? So like, I think that like, if you're planning on, your game, like your group is familiar with like D&D or like Pathfinder or something, and you want to try out a little bit of mech combat, so I'm just gonna be like Lancer, right? But you're like, oh, is it do I need to tell my players like, hey, we're gonna play Lancer because I want to play robots, because they thought about, like, the creators of Lancer have thought about like what mech combat is and how the rule set feels, right? Or it's like, am I gonna put the work in to figure out how to use Dungeons and Dragons but as like a mech combat simulator instead of a sword and board spell slinging simulator, right? It's like, it really depends how much effort you think it's going to be for your players to learn a new game, versus like, downloading, or versus like you trying to like cram like mech combat into this scenario. I think that as a person who breaks games off, and like, totally do it if you feel like that's where you want to go with it. It's your game and no one's going to tell you how to run it. So if you want to take bits and pieces from, other systems and jam it in there, to just jam it in there.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm always like,
right.
One of the things that sometimes on Twitter I see is always the play a different game response to how do I do this in X game. And it's like, that's not what they were asking for.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's like, they're mostly just asking for like, which I would say like you point them towards the game, right? And say like, oh, hey, I think what you're trying to do is in this game. Go, like, here's the rules for it. This is how you get it, right? And they can make the judge of like how much they want to take. Because maybe there's only like, maybe like Blaze in the Dark isn't the system you want to run forever, right?
Not really.
But maybe right? But I think Blaze in the Dark is crazy good. Definitely, if you want to do a heist, just take a bunch of crap from Blaze in the Dark, because that game is literally heist the game, right?
Yeah, like I'm not super into like some of the setting stuff, but definitely the mechanics of how they do certain things. It's like, I really like this, so I would love to take it and implant it into this other game.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I think that like, the aspects of like, if I had to try and put D&D like into a mech combat scenario, I think it would just have to be like, the mech as its own entity, right? It means it can take lots of damage. It needs to have hull points. Stuff needs to blow up off of it, but you can still operate it because you're not getting hurt, right? The mech is getting, destroyed. I would say some sort of degrading combat effectiveness, and like the damage numbers don't really have to even change. They're just like, maybe even the scaling doesn't really have to change. It's just kind of what you're trying to do, right? Like, instead of it being like rooms in a dungeon, it's like you're fighting across a town or something, because you got to scale it up, right? They're still just squares on a grid.
Except each square is like, I don't know, 15 feet instead or something. I don't know.
Exactly, right? It's like a building or whatever, right? Yeah. And like, maybe, and if you're talking about mechs and stuff like that, like maybe there's a lot of ranged combat, so maybe like cover needs to be more included, right? Maybe different, and also like different statuses and stuff like that. I honestly think that like, if you're gonna play a mech combat game, like go find a system, because the genres are too different from D&D, because the whole like, I think that like, just go find a system that has a bunch of added stuff into it, and or like added stuff for specifically like sci-fi mech fantasy, right? It doesn't always have to be Lancer. It could be, I think there's like a bunch of other ones out there too, that I haven't experienced, but go look at them, and maybe just be like, okay, just, hey guys, we're just gonna play Lancer for like one session because you guys are jumping in some mechs. We'll just make a bunch of characters. You can still play your character, but now since they're inside of a mech, you don't get your cool abilities.
Yeah, we'll just use different mechanics. I was just thinking, and I will bounce this off of you so we can make it a discussion topic. Is there a difference, like between adopting something to a system or using a different system? Is there a difference when it comes to either a new campaign or doing something different in an ongoing campaign?
Oh, yeah, totally. I think if it's an ongoing campaign and you want to adding something in for like, especially if it's just one part, like exactly if you just were planning a heist and you want to use some Blaze in the Dark stuff, yeah, just put it into the system. But if it's a new campaign and it's specifically trying to focus on the thing you're trying to jam into 5e or something, just forget about 5e. I mean, it's not that good anyway. Just go play something else.
Hot takes.
I don't know. I think it's fine. Like every system's fine. Every system has its breaking points. Nothing is as elegant as people make it out to be in the Twitter lands. Like, everyone's nuts. Things suck. Things break. you probably need to break a few things to make it work the way you want it to work. Just use whatever you want, like just cannibalize it. I'm always down to just cannibalize it. Like why do you need to, some rule book telling you how to play a game? The rule book's just a book. Just go have fun with your friends. You nerd.
Yeah,
like,
what's the
come
book
on.
gonna do?
Yeah. This is a class, man. We're just playing tabletop games. No one's gonna test you. Like, fuck.
Yeah, no, definitely. I was just thinking, like, the difference between starting something new and continuing something. Because I feel like if you're continuing something, you want to stick with what the players already know. So you're more likely to try to adapt something into that. But if you're starting something new, is it better to just invest in learning this new system? And that even could depend on, like, as we're breaking this down, that could even depend on how complex the thing is. Because I would think that, like, having to create a whole new system for something like fighting mechs or ships or whatever, you might want to lean into something new, but something smaller that's like, here's these specific elements of this specific type of, like, encounter, then maybe you don't need a whole new rule set for that. You just need, like, some small mechanical changes.
Yeah, for sure. And also just to kind of I guess kind of touch point on like what Siege was saying in the last part of his question or whatever, is like the game is about rolling high numbers, like, right? And the game is like about successes and failures. So like, if you want to implement a system, you don't actually have to take it 100%. You just have to take the idea of it, right? And then just, figure out in your game. Usually there's like a clear, like, this is the success threshold. You have to roll above it, and then you did it, right? So just do that, right? Like, you might not have a very specific mechanic for flashbacks, but you can definitely, if the player rolls high, then it worked, right? It's that kind of thing. And I think that, like, there isn't like the number crunching games do kind of pile up sometimes, especially if a very like a robust system, right? Like Pathfinder is one of those things where, like, there's a lot of numbers being thrown around, right? But realistically, it's like, if you just, it's only there to really figure out the unknown cases, like the little nuance. But if you roll really high, you did it. If you rolled really low, you didn't. If you roll a 10, now we got to do the math, right? Right?
Yeah,
it's
basically.
Like, I don't know. Let's check the math, kind of deal. So don't get too stuck up on, like, the crunch of stuff. Just roll the die and see if it's high enough, and then just be like, yeah, I guess you did it, fam. Like, good job.
Yeah, that I guess we could talk about, I don't know if I want to lean into a whole new topic just yet, because we're getting to the hour mark, and I feel like some of these we could definitely expand more on than just like 10 minutes. But I did want to talk about, since you kind of offhand mentioned it there, like getting a feel for the difficulty of things. Like, I don't know if we really can get into setting DC specifically, especially because with some games, like, they'll have that list. Like, I know Pathfinder 2 has, like, here's a list of appropriate DCs for different levels of things, and here's some general DCs. I don't know, do you, like, fall back on that if you're trying to arbitrarily figure out in the moment how difficult should something be?
Yeah, totally. I totally use Pathfinder is great for that. I mean, I really appreciate them just doing the math outright for me. So all I have to do is be like, what level is it? Good. Done. Right? Like, they have two different ways of doing it. They have a whole chart that's breaking down in like a, whatever the gradient that they figured out to be the optimal play, right? And there's another chart where it's just like, if it's really difficult, it's 20, right? Something super simple, there's 4 options, choose it.
Yeah, like, right? 10, there's 15, 20, 25 or whatever.
Yeah, right. And it's like, no, that's like whichever style you want, like, that gives it to you, right? So if you want a little bit more crunch, a little bit more nuance, just use the bigger table. That's it, right? But yeah, like, if you think about it, like, it's only a 20-sided die, right? That's the kind of like what we're going off of. And even if typically, like, you can, I don't know, 5e with their proficiency bonuses or whatever, but I would say, like, it's usually like 10 plus the level that they're at really would make sense to me. In Pathfinder, everything goes up by your level, so that's kind of where I'm at. But like, whatever the scaling level of for D&D, could be like your attack bonus or something like that. It could be like your proficiency modifier. Just be like half of the whatever dice it requires to roll plus their proficiency modifier, and that's a standard roll to me. that's actually a little bit easier because it's a 50-50, right? Yeah. Ultimately, like that's where the variation. I'm like, sure, with like, you know, different scenarios, different conditions, you might get pluses and minuses to that roll, but you know, whatever their general adage to the roll plus a 10 is that the DC where a normal roll is, and then you know, 15 plus that or like 5 plus that is like the next kind of like if it's easy, if it's difficult, and then just say like you gotta roll above a 20 or something like that, or whatever. 20 plus if you just want to be like, this is super crazy hard, but if you do it, I guess I am legend, like like, you know, I am the king now, right? So
yeah. I mean, like when do you because for me there's a lot of moments where it's like I don't want to like stop everything to figure out how difficult this one small thing should be. So I just kind of look at it and I think, well, this seems fairly difficult, but they got over 20 or they got over 25 or they got over 30 or whatever. So I don't know, like what are the moments where you actually need to like stop everything and go check the numbers?
It's never worth it. It's never worth checking the numbers. If your player busts out a 25 or a 30, just give it to him. Like, what do you mean, man? Like, you don't have to give it to them all the way, right? They can still have consequences because they're being an idiot, and they just because you rolled a natural 20 doesn't mean you're gonna survive being tossed into lava. You know, I mean, you're not gonna come out unscathed. Man, it's lava. Like, you know, that's not how video games work, right? If you like,
you might just have like one split second to do something as opposed to no chance at all. But I mean, even then, exactly. It's like if you're gonna get something from a die roll, it's got to be something that you have at least a 5% chance at succeeding at. Otherwise, I guess you probably generally shouldn't roll at all.
Yeah, I mean, I still give people the chance to roll because people like rolling dice.
I mean,
right?
Yeah, but I'm a bit torn on that because, you know, I like rolling dice. But
yeah, and sometimes you just have to. Sometimes you can stop players and be like, you don't need to roll the dice. You're just gonna fail, or like you don't need to roll the dice. You're just gonna succeed because I know you and what you're trying to pull off, and I believe your character can do it, right? Yeah. Oftentimes I'm like, yeah, your character just does it. You don't need to roll, right? Because you know. And usually that happens like later on in the campaign after, you know, I've gotten to know the character a little bit better and like I've seen their feats in live in action, right? So I'm like, no, you've done this before. Why the hell do you need to roll? Like,
you can jump that 5-foot gap.
Yeah, it's like Tuesday for you. Come on, like let's move on, right? But I'm also a big fan of just because they roll high doesn't mean they don't get the consequences. They just get to, you know, do the thing that they want to do, but you know, you're still gonna get hurt.
Yeah,
you're gonna hear real bad, kid. Like,
yeah, I don't know. Because for me, it's hard to be like, no, you're gonna fail. Don't bother to roll. Like, you're gonna succeed. Don't bother to roll. That's fine. But like, I don't know.
Give them the chance. Give them the chance to say goodbye before they fall into the bottomless pit. Sure, man. Like,
it's always the you can certainly try phrase that I really like.
Yeah, just say, I would say just give me a roll and just see what happens, right? If it's not like a 19 or a 20, then we just don't even have to talk about it. We'll just be like, sorry, kid, not enough. Yeah. Better luck next time.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I try to work on as a GM is just keeping the game flowing. Like, that's always the top priority to me. Which is why I'm really glad to have like another player in there who knows the rules very well, because then it's like, okay, I know I can trust you to figure out X, Y, and Z thing while I like move on. And if it's a big deal that I actually need to stop, then yeah, okay, I'll look into it. But for the most part, for me, I always prefer to just make a ruling on something and then keep going. I guess we're talking about game flow now for 2 seconds, but I always prefer to just say like, well, let's just let this work this way for now and then keep going, because I hate like stopping. I already hate making people wait for their turn to come around, to make the person whose turn it is stop and wait while I figure something out, or even worse, on an NPC turn. That stresses me out. I don't know if you feel the same way about that, or if you have a difference.
I often don't look things up. I often just make stuff up immediately because it doesn't matter, because it's just like all these games are, if you roll high, you did it. Like, right? So it's like if I don't have to know, or if I don't even feel good about the roll, I'm like, nah, whatever, kid, get out of here. Like,
I mean, if you break it down to its simplest elements, yes.
Yeah, I'm always about that, because I often just make up stuff for, like, I don't like, for monsters or bad guys or even situations. I just kind of make stuff up on the spot and be like, okay, give me a roll, like, don't die, like, right? Because even with a good scenario would be the Mistress Sonata fight, when you guys are fighting in the middle of that courtyard, trying to rescue Brian. And you're fighting the big bad of the whole story, right? At like level 4 or something. And you guys had the demon net. And it was just like, well, I crunched the numbers, and I'm like, I don't think anybody here can really throw that thing at any sort of effectiveness on the person, on the bad guy. So I just gave it a 50-50 roll. If you just rolled above 10, then, or rolled 11 up or whatever, then you did it, right? Because I was like, that's more dramatic to me. That's like, instead of being like a 5% roll or something like that, right? Or like a 10% roll. I'm like, nah, forget this. Let's just go on with it. And
it's insane how many rolls that took, by the way.
Yeah, it took like 4 or 5 rolls, which is pretty funny. It was definitely the right call for me, because my combat took a lot longer, and which was cool. Because we got some cool class moments with like Ray, Payne's character, actually doing a lot of damage to her, surprising her a lot. Everybody was like, holy shit, what? And like, to be fair, I was really happy that Payne's character was there too, because I could single out at him because he has the highest HP pool. That's a good tip, by the way. If you have a big bad guy, just keep hitting the dude with the most amount of HP, and everyone will see the numbers and be like, "Oh my god, that guy's so scary." But it's only scary, but there's not deadly because they're not getting hit. The guy who can take the hits, you deliver the hits to them, right? So get yourself in front of the sponge and then let him soak up some damage, and the sponge will feel good, you'll feel good, and everybody feels scared. Like.
I mean, first off, super secret bonus tip, but also, I mean, I like to hit the person who either hit last or did the most damage last, and if that spellcaster did a lot of damage, I mean...
It's all fair game, man. But everybody else, he was hitting people, and everybody else was trying to throw a small net onto her, so she was like, whatever.
Yeah, at that time, yeah, she would only care about the person who's actually doing something effective.
You guys are just being a bunch of weird people throwing these really small, very flimsy net at her. But, joke's on her. It worked.
Yeah, not every RPG party has a smart person, but they're mostly successful.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
yeah.
I think we covered like a ton of different things in this episode. The timestamps are going to be probably a bit difficult for me to figure out. But yeah, I think we got into a lot of good stuff, especially that discussion on homebrewing things. I think that was fun, and the discussion on character death. Hopefully, people got something interesting out of it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And yeah, just like don't be afraid to just take ideas from other places and put it in your game, or just if something doesn't make any sense, just throw it out and just think, make it how you want to do it, how you think it's supposed to go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Trust your instincts. If a rule as written doesn't make sense to you narratively, you can make it work a different way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I guess that's the show.
Yeah. Again, if any of our listeners out there, our lovely listeners, have any sort of questions, comments, or anything like that they want to drop below, please feel free to do so. And, if it's something that we can talk about for a few minutes, we can roll it into an episode. Of course, you can also reach us on Twitter at winwithdice, or our website, winwithdice.ca. If you follow us on the socials, you can see when we go live with live streams, which right now is every Thursday and Friday. I kind of I need an excuse to play video games without feeling like I'm wasting time or being lazy, so I have made it into content. So I am playing Outer Worlds on Thursdays and Skyrim on Fridays, both at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you want to check that out, we're only a few episodes into Outer Worlds. So if you want to get started on that new series, be sure to check it out. You'll find the playlist on our channel. And of course, subscribe and ring that notification bell so you get a notification every time we upload a new podcast episode every Wednesday at 12. Or when we go live, you get a notification for that as well. And you can come hang out and chat. It's super fun over there. It is mostly just me being silly and then responding to chat like 2 minutes later. Of course, we also got to give out shout outs to people. I do want to link Siege Fault on Twitter as well below. Just because he really gave us a whole lot of unique ideas as well. He also mentioned the podcast replay, which is sort of focused on telling stories about experiences in gaming and game development, in the gaming space, including tabletop RPGs and providing new perspectives and things like that. I haven't got too deep into it, but I just started watching one episode and I was like, oh, this is really good. So I just wanted to shout it out, and I'll have it also linked below. Nice. The replay podcast. I'll have a link to it down there. As well, of course, I got a shout out to Shaka and the Field Guide to Infocane. Awesome Lancer setting. You can head over to the Itch.io page and pick that up. You get a PDF book of the setting, as well as an LCP file that you can put into your CompCon, the website CompCon. If you're playing Lancer, I'm assuming you're using it, because I certainly could not play Lancer without using it. So you can use those different additions to your game, as well as Celeste's Lancer RPG NPC guides. If you're looking to run Lancer at some point, or you just want to know more about how the NPCs in Lancer work, or how they might work together, definitely check those out. They can give you some ideas. And of course, shout out to USP, the Untold Stories project, where I'm there every week, every Monday, playing Mutants and Masterminds. As well as in some of their one-shots. I was in a Things from the Flood game recently, which is sort of a sci-fi game set in the 90s. 90s Stranger Things, basically.
Ooh, okay, cool.
And it was super interesting. There was a lot of discussion about different 90s topics and 90s tech and stuff like that, which for me was because I was 5 at the time that this game was taking place. So I was like, what was popular in the 90s? I don't remember. I'm an early 2000s kid more than anything. And of course, the Mutants and Masterminds game, we had a new episode on Monday, which was basically us in an alien dimension, trying to... in an alien dimension, and we also time traveled. So
just a little bit, right? Just a little bit of time traveling. It was a lot of time traveling.
Just a healthy amount of time traveling. So be sure to check that out. I'm gonna be playing Crash Pandas on there, which is street racing raccoons. I believe on the 15th, so a week from when you're hearing this. So be sure to check that out. And I think that's it for our shoutouts today.
Yeah, for sure. That list keeps getting longer, and I like it.
Yeah, man. I'm a big fan of directing people to things that I like, so.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. I guess there's just the thing that Calvin needs to do.
Yep. The one thing left that Calvin needs to do is to tell everybody out there listening to keep on winning with dice, and we'll see you next week.
All right, see you guys.